Oh, for flip's sake. I'm just trying to think of an intro. It's all going wrong. This is what it's called. Here we go. So welcome along to It's All Going Wrong, and we're in the day with none other than the guy who's probably responsible for the soundtrack to many people's teenage lives, certainly my own. If you don't recognise his name or his face, you'll certainly recognise his voice. It's none other than the legend himself, as it says on his t-shirt, Lawrence John, the founder of Energy 106. How are you?
I'm well, Ron. Thank you for inviting me along. And by the way, I didn't buy this myself.
Right.
Somebody bought it for me, and who am I to argue?
Yeah, of course.
So, yes, it's good to be here. And, it's good to be anywhere at my age. Yeah. But I've had a great innings, and I'm still looking forward to DJing for some years yet.
Yeah, well, you've had an interesting life, and we're looking forward to hearing about that there. Mm-hmm. This sort of shows sort of just how you get into music, all the sort of places you've been, you've done, and then what you're up to today.
Okay.
So probably best to start at the start.
Well, I was 5 years old listening to Radio Luxembourg,
right.
Or the old Light programme, which is BBC Radio 2 these days. When I was about 5, I was music mad even at that age. But in those days, there was very little pop music. It was all easy listening orchestras and maybe Frank Sinatra or somebody like that.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, Elvis arrives, and that was it. I got the buzz. I was into music, but suddenly I was a real avid music fan. And even at that young age of 5, not even 6, 5 years of age. And I continued listening to radio and being mad about music all the way up until I left school. And when I left school, I went into the bar business as a barman because I loved meeting people and mixing with them. Yeah. And I didn't stay on at school to do anything in terms of exams. I left at 15 and went straight into bar work, and I loved it. But fast forward a couple of years and several other occupations, too many to mention. Itchy feet I had.
So you finding out what you wanted to do, or did you know like the music?
No, I hadn't. I didn't have any plans or didn't foresee a future in music for me at that stage. Yes, I was music mad, radio mad, listening to Radio Caroline at pirate ships in England and Radio Scotland, and then. I'm trying to think of about 1967, I actually decided I wanted to try and be a DJ.
Right.
Because it looked glamorous. I was looking at, God forbid using the name, but I looked at Jimmy Savile on Top of the Pops and I thought, I could be there.
It's funny you mentioned Jimmy Savile, because I always say when I teach a DJ Academy, he was probably the first person to actually mix 2 records together, which is the standard nowadays.
But for me, he was a flamboyant character, and it looked like an exciting life to be a DJ. Yeah. And I actually auditioned for him in a DJ audition at the Plaza in Chichester Street in around 67, 68. I was hopeless. I just went through the motions. It was an idea, and I literally probably didn't do very well introducing the records, and left it at that. And then about a year later, in 68, I think it was, 69, I went along to the best new nightclub at the time. It was called Tito's in Victoria Square, where the Victoria Centre is now. And they had a bar called the Victoria Bar right beside it. And they had Just Jerry's, a disco, very trendy young people's disco on the first floor. And I loved this, but couldn't get a job because I had no experience.
Yeah.
So I approached the bar and rented the floor above them and ran my own disco. I got my own turntables and was playing all the latest pop hits, Yeah. So that was me. And I went from that to mobile disco.
Yep.
And I was touring around the country playing mobile setups. The first big one was the Imperial Hotel in Donaghadee. And I advertised the best music and best DJs and best light show and everything, hyping it all out of proportion. And I thought, one of these days, a lot of people are going to come here and find out I'm overselling this. So I booked some DJs, including Emperor Roscoe and Stuart Henry, and that brought the people there, and the place really took off. So after that, I never looked back. I ended up doing about 5-6 nights a week in places.
What was the, when you look at now, like you see DJs, they make their own records and they're quite big social media. Was it DJs a draw then, or was it more bands, or what? Was it have to be on radio? Or?
It would have been personality driven in those days. Going into a bar and playing music was not just enough for me. I had to entertain, a few jokes, a few visual things, and I would have started a disco where there's no dancing. They wouldn't allow dancing in the Ivanhoe carried off.
Right.
And it went so well, the bar manager said, wonder could we put it in a little portable floor for you? So they had a portable floor that raised up into the ceiling and came back down on the Wednesday night when I started my regular Wednesday night thing. Amazing. And the people loved it. There was only room for maybe 25 dancers on the floor. That's how big it was. But I never looked back after that in terms of live DJing, and there was no mixing in those days. It was just boom, 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 one record, nice and tight after the other, and you got the flow where you didn't put two awkward records together. You sort of followed a flow, and it took you different places every night.
Kind of anything goes in terms of music style.
Absolutely anything goes. I would even finish off with a classical piece at the end of the night, conduct the orchestra, and just never want to. Hide behind a screen or anything. It just was out there, larger than life.
Brilliant.
But so where were we then? Yes, the discos in bars and hotels went very well, and then downtown radio started. I applied as a radio DJ, but I think they already had their lineup, and I didn't get a job. But
what sort of year was this then? Did they start downtown?
76. 76. Yeah. I think it was March 76, St. Patrick's Day 76 even. And about over the next couple of months, I happened to bump into several times the program controller there. And he invited me for lunch one day, and he got a call that Eddie West, who used to be one of the popular DJs on at that stage, his mother had died, I think it was, or was ill, some one of the two, and he couldn't do his 6:30 slot that evening. And the program controller said, "You're a DJ, could you fit in for him?" I said, I haven't done radio, I wouldn't even know how to use the controls. And he said, "Don't worry, I'll sit beside you and tell you what to do." So that's what he did, and I'm walking on eggshells, But at the end of it, he said, "Do you know what? For somebody thrown in at the deep end," he says, "you kept your cool and you did okay."
Sometimes it's the best way, isn't it?
And a few months later, what the heck was his name? Paul Prentice, was it, or something like that? Who one of the presenters? I might have their name wrong, but he left to manage Queen of all groups.
All right, the band.
And there was an opening up. He was doing an oldies show. And the program controller said, "Would you like to have a go at that?" He says, "I believe you have an extensive library." And I had about 17,000 records at that stage.
My word.
That's how mad about music I was. So I got I started off with an oldies show called Yesterday's Favourites. Ended up doing the top 40 countdown on Sundays, and then doing the late night show 10 until 1. So got a good bit of experience from middle of 76 or late 76 through until 1980. Right. And then Eddie West had already left downtown in Northern Ireland to work in Dublin. And he came up to visit one day whenever I was at downtown, and he said, "Lawrence," I said, "what are you doing now?" He said, "Lawrence, I'm on this fabulous station in Dublin called Radio Nova. Have you heard of it?" I says, "No, could you even get it up here?" Took me into my car, tuned it in. It was coming loud and proud from Dublin. And I thought, my God, that's where I want to be.
Yep.
I left shortly afterwards and headed to Dublin. I was, really intent. I was going to be on that station.
Mm-hmm.
It was like nothing I'd heard before. It was exciting.
What were they doing different then?
Sorry?
What were they doing different then? What would you say?
It was just exciting American-style top 40 radio. And it was just so much more exciting. And the music was different. There was a lot of American West Coast, which weren't hits in the UK. A lot of American West Coast records that they started playing. And they had syndicated radio programs from the top DJs in America, the legendary Casey Kasem, who invented the top 40, and then his younger rival who came along soon afterwards, Rick Dees. And we ran, the station ran those. It ran a country syndicated show, and it ran an oldies show with soundtrack of the 60s with Gary Owens. So aside from the normal or usual or local DJs, there were these big shots from America, and it just gave the station a whole lift, and it inspired the local DJs to strive harder and be better than what they actually were and bring out their personality. Yeah. So anyway, cut a long story short, I went down to Dublin, and I remember walking into the studios and offices in Herbert Street, and the owner there said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Lawrence John." And I said, "I work on independent local radio in Northern Ireland, downtown radio," not knowing that he hated independent local radio. So he said, "All right." He just totally dismissed me, blanked me. That was me. I thought it was like a foot in the door saying I was on legal radio, legal commercial radio. But no, it was a black mark against me, and I got it. So I left, but I decided to had a recording studio making adverts, and I'd been doing loads of TV adverts since I joined Downtown, and even TV and radio. So I went into the studio, which was kind of part of the Radio Nova setup, but it operated independently. So I went in and spoke to the producer. I said, "I can do adverts for you. So give me a try." And he says, "Brilliant." So I'd be in there once or twice a week. And I remember...
Did you move down to Dublin to live?
Oh, yes, I had to move down to Dublin, yes, to live. It was all or nothing for me, and I was coming in and out on a regular basis. And then the first time I bumped into the owner, the boss of Nova, he kind of just almost dismissed me again, but remembered he'd kind of dismissed me before. And over the period of a year, it went from to that, and then, "How are you?" And then it just started coming around and being more friendly.
Probably thinking this guy's persistent here, like a year. And,
maybe so. I was literally there to do the adverts, but I knew I was obviously putting my face into place.
I'm sure he was here in the adverts too.
Yeah, so that's another thing. Yes, I'm sure he was. But I used to treat myself to a fish supper in just around the corner. The studios were in Herbert Street off Bagot Street near Balls Bridge, and it was literally a couple of 100 yards down the end of the street, round the corner, and you were on the canal. And there was a little fish and chip shop there, Cafola's Fish and Chips. I used to go there as a treat at the end of my voiceover sessions, So I'm in the chip shop this day, and I just literally plonked myself down at the table and was looking outside through the window to the canal, and in walks the boss of Nova, Chris Carey. So he walks up, he says, "Oh, you can sit down." I said, "Aye, okay." So he didn't beat about the bush. He says, "I like what you're doing." I had joined another station in the meantime, which was starting to make a mark. It was about probably, aside from RTE, the national station, there was Nova, which was number one. And the previous, I suppose, popular station was Sunshine Radio. So it would have been number two in the pirate listings. But the station that I joined and was on it for about 6 months, because I missed radio and I wanted to get, in fact, I worked on a small country station in Dublin, small country pirate, treble TR. And then I worked for this Capital Radio, which was short-lived for 2 or 3 months, but finally got a gig on Radio Leinster, which was studios up on the mountaintop overlooking all of Dublin. It was a brilliant view. But I was there 6 months, and as I said, Chris Carey said to me, I like what you're doing there. I was doing the breakfast show from 7 to 11.
Mm-hmm.
He said, would you be interested in working for me? I said,
what do you think I'm here for?
Yeah. So he ordered himself a fish supper, and we got stuck in, and he said, I like what you're doing. He said, I'd like you to do that for me, but from midnight until 6, because Dublin had a very lively nightlife.
Right.
Hospital workers, taxi drivers, people going to and from not only the nightclubs that finished at maybe 1 in the morning, but the Leeson Street nightclubs. There were half a dozen or more of those that operated without proper licenses until 6 or 7 in the morning. So there was a really big nighttime audience, and Nova had captured it. But he said, I like what you're doing, and if you could do exactly the same for me at a different day part, midnight to 6, I would love to have you. And I said, great.
Find common ground over a fish supper then.
Absolutely. And I said, could I, with one stipulation, I said, these people have been very good to me. They just gave me a rise 2 weeks ago, and I never even asked for any money. You know, I was happy enough, but they gave me more money. So I said, what are you offering? I said, I'm getting that now. So there wouldn't have been any point in moving for money, but I had to move for the prestige.
Yeah.
But with one stipulation, I said, these people have been good to me. They give me the rise. I don't want to leave them in a lurch. I'd like to give them time to find another breakfast show DJ. So could I start in a fortnight? He said, no, I want you to start tomorrow.
Oh.
I said,
what time's your breakfast show start?
The breakfast show in Leinster, Radio Leinster, was 7 o'clock. So I said, how about I do 2 weeks' notice and do both stations for the fortnight? He was flabbergasted. He says, God, he actually laughed.
Yeah.
He says, okay, if that's what it takes to get you. So I would do midnight till 6 on Nova. I started the next day, that is. And then I drove up from the city centre up to the top of the mountain and was there for 7 and did 7 till 11. I was doing other things. I was always quite a businessman in terms of ideas and things. And I'd started, my girlfriend at the time, and I had just broken up, and she was a model in the top model agency in Dublin at the time. So I wanted to keep in touch with her and started a model agency along with a model from her model agency. And that was going about 6 or 8 months. We were doing reasonably well. But my schedule at that stage was midnight till 6, then on Nova, then 7 till 11 on Radio Leinster. I go home and catch a few hours sleep and go into the model agency from maybe 3 or 4 until 6. And then I would go to my disco.
Still doing the disco?
And I was doing discos. I started the disco in the Henry Grattan and Bagot Street, a well-known watering hole where most of the DJs from Nova would regularly meet and have a drink. And I talked the owner into starting a disco in the basement down below. And there was no dancing in it either. But it took off, and it was the place to be. And of course, I was on the radio. I was able to say, I'll see you later on tonight. The disco was called Shivers. He called it that. So I'll see you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock in Shivers.
That's a hell of a schedule. Like
it was, but I think I was driven a bit more by the fact that I'd just broken up with my girlfriend. I didn't want to be moping, and I wanted to keep busy and active, and that was the best way to get over it. So on Radio Nova, doing really well, and they had a journalist dispute because Chris had decided, the boss had decided he was paying too much to the newsreaders, more than even the DJs. They had a big news team of journalists, maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing at this stage, 6 or 8 or something like that, maybe even 12. But anyway, he just thought one day, this bill's too big for news. I mean, we're a music station. So he let a few of them go. And they were always refused entry into the journalists' union because they were pirate. But as soon as they were let go, the journalists saw it as an opportunity to attack
Pirate Radio.
So they welcomed them as members and then allowed them to picket Radio Nova. So they moved the studios because of the pickets up to the top of the mountain near the transmitter, and the journalists would form a picket line there, and you had to cross the picket line every single day, which was not much fun when some of those people you had worked with on the station, you know.
I can imagine.
And of course, there were booze and sort of all sorts of shenanigans going on as you walk through. And lo and behold, after a couple of months of this, I was tracked down to the Henry Grattan Bar and got a phone call from the Equity, the Actors Union, who also were the union you had to join to be on the like of Downtown Radio and to do adverts on radio and TV in those days. So they said, you're crossing our fellow unions' picket lines, because all the unions are like in bed with each other, for want of a better expression. But you're crossing the journalists' union, and as a union ourselves, we don't like this. So we're suggesting that you stop doing that. Otherwise, we might have to cancel your membership. And this was a huge dilemma for me. I thought, my God, what do I do? I mean, I might last here, but what happens about legal radio? Who knows where it's going? And I just thought, I give in, and I've been reluctant and I regretted it ever since. But I gave in at that stage. If I'd known soon afterwards, or a lot of years afterwards, how things panned out, I would not have given in.
What was their main issue then at the picket line? Just the piracy, or because they were
no? I think they wanted the journalists reinstated, and that was never going to happen. I don't think, because the boss of Nova, Chris Carey, dug his heels in. The union dug their heels in, but I decided to reluctantly leave Nova. And where could I go after being on the top station?
Yeah.
And the most exciting station in the country, if not Europe at the time.
How long were you there then?
Sorry?
How long were you at Nova then?
I was there a couple of years. And at that stage, I thought the only way is down from here. I didn't fancy RTE. Just wasn't my style. It was quite old-fashioned conservative. And there was nothing else in the pirate scene that was anywhere close to Nova, except for Sunshine, I suppose. But for me, it didn't have the same excitement or buzz that Nova had. But I ended up going there because there was nowhere else, and I didn't want to be off radio. Robbie Dale, the owner of Sunshine, took me on board right away. But after 3 months, I thought, I'm just not enjoying this, you know. There's nothing wrong with the station or the people. It wasn't doing anything for me. And I thought, you know, I've got to start another station. I'd never started one before, but I thought, I'm going to have a go. So I came up with the name of Q102 and decided to get some backers. And I was doing a nightclub as well as the disco bar in Leeson Street. And I mentioned it to the owner, colourful character called Pierre Doyle. I don't think that was his real name, but he owned one of the top nightclubs there. And he says, I'll back you. So he got together with a few other nightclubs. So it was backed by 3 or 4 nightclub owners. This brand new station called Q102. I didn't want to take Radio Nova on head to head with the same format. Yeah. So I decided to go for a more easy listening format. And there was a kind of a musical format in America, or genre, that was quite popular in the States at the time, called The Quiet Storm. And it was a lot of soul music, like George Benson, right. And the softer side of rock. So that was the format I came up with, so I wouldn't be able to. So I wouldn't be going head to head with my former colleagues and my former boss. And I decided I would go for this other format. I managed to get 2 or 3 former DJs who'd been let go from Nova, so I ended up with 3 or 4 Nova DJs on Q102, and it launched in I think early February 1985. Took about 6 months to get on the air, 5 or 6 months. And we operated from a similar building just around the corner from Radio Nova. And everything was going exceedingly well. And 3 months later, I should say, Pierre Doyle, the owner, main backer of Q102, had said to me at one stage, could we not do the Nova format? I said, I don't really want to do Nova format because we'll be seen as copycats. Plus, we'll be going head to head and splitting the market, maybe. splitting listenership. So I preferred to do this. He never said anything else. So I presumed he had accepted my reason for not doing it. And 3 months after the station had launched, I arrived in one day to be told by a new boss that I was out, and they were going head to head with Nova. So I didn't realize I could have done it easily had I known that he was so adamant. He was very competitive. He wanted to be top dog and wanted to take on Nova and beat Nova. And he had pulled a masterstroke in getting the head of sales from Nova, who had all the contacts and the experience of selling for Nova. So that was good. So he was the new general manager, and I was out. And that was me. So where do you go from there? And I thought, here we go again. I thought, I'll start another station. this was going to be, now that I had done it and I knew I could do it, I was cocky enough, I suppose, to think I can do it again. And I got the guy that owned the Henry Grattan, where I was doing the disco, to back me in a new radio that was going to be called Z100, after the top station in New York City that was rivaling the West Coast sound of Kiss FM, which Nova had copied. So I thought, this makes sense, Z100. And he got a few other backers in, and we were ready to go on air. So we had a meeting scheduled for, I think it was a Thursday morning, in 85. And we were meeting in the pub at 11:30, waiting for the bank, or 11, maybe, for the banks to open. There was a bank right next door to the pub. And the investors were there all ready to put in their dosh. And that was it. Ready for the investment. We were off and running at once the money was in. And I got a phone call just before 11:30 from, oh God, what's his name now? He was the former manager of Capital Radio, Aidan Day, former manager program controller at Capital Radio, the UK's first independent radio station, a legendary station already at that stage. It had been going from probably 74, 75. But I knew the name right away, Aidan Day. Who doesn't, if you're in the radio business? He was the top of his game.
Where were they based, Capital?
In London. No, it was London station. Still going today. But he had left or been let go, I don't know which, but he wasn't with them anymore. And he said, Lawrence, I've managed to track you down. I believe you do a disco in this bar. So he said, I've been trying to get you all over the place for weeks now, but I finally got you. I says, well, what can I do for you? He says, I'm involved in setting up a pirate station that hopefully will be legitimate someday in Italy, with the express aim of setting up studios in Monte Carlo and doing TV shows as well. So we'd be interested in doing radio and TV for me. And he says, because you're exactly what I want for the style that we're doing over there. He said, I'd heard you when I was in Dublin, but couldn't find you and tried tracking you down. So he said, if you're interested, the job's yours. I thought, well, a bit of a dilemma. I thought, this is a big chance.
Yeah.
Monte Carlo TV as well as radio.
You're thinking Irish weather or
absolutely, and the beaches and weather. So it was a bit of a no-brainer, really. And the fact that Aidan Day was a big name, and I thought, I'm moving up. And I thought, right. I felt so bad about the guys outside. I had to go out and say, listen, you won't believe this, guys. I've just had an amazing offer. But I let them down gently. I said, I'm gonna need a couple of days to think about it. I knew rightly what I was going to do, but I didn't.
But because you had set this up with all lemons, getting them in.
I just didn't want to be as cutting as or as bold as saying sorry, So I let them down easy, basically. Yeah. And that was it. I was off to Monte Carlo, and I was Ventimiglia, because the studios were based in Italy at that stage, and they were trying to get rent studios in Tele Monte Carlo. And
what about their reach up and then in the radio? Because obviously you speak English.
Yes, it was basically aimed Tele Monte Carlo, although they would have had French speaking programs. But the pirate station that I was on, which was called Riviera 104, had lots of dosh. It was backed by, I can't remember his name, but he was the Australian equivalent of Michael Aspel, who was huge in TV in those days. And he was the main financial backer behind the plans for this radio station. One, to get a license for radio in Monte Carlo, and then to do TV. So I spent 2 years there, and the plans never materialized, and I was getting browned off, literally going to the beach every day. I mean, it sounds stupid, but it was true. You know, you go to the beach every day for 6 months, and you know, suddenly you don't really want to go to the beach the next day.
People think that, like, you know, sitting on an island in the sun's like your ideal life, but there has to be ambition there.
And the funny thing about it was, when I came home here, it was a pleasure to experience the cloudy weather and the different atmosphere. It was just a break from the norm, you know. Far off fields are green, as I say, you know. So anyway, after 2 years, I got a call from a guy called Miles Johnson, who was an engineer. He was working for the BBC and maybe Sky at that stage, or maybe later. But he says, we're starting another pirate station. He said, like Nova, in Monaghan, across the border to target Belfast, because there were no new licenses. It was only downtown radio. This was 87, and I had started in downtown. Downtown had started certainly broadcasting in 76. So in those 10 years, nothing had changed. It was still just downtown radio. And for me, I just wasn't interested. It was just too, I don't know. Not parochial is not the word. Maybe too conservative. There wasn't enough excitement about it for me. So downtown didn't interest me. Going back there,
you have to think now that the Troubles were probably going full swing.
Oh,
as well.
They were still all this time, you know. But I was off. He said, we're starting this. We're going to call it Kiss FM. And Chris Carey, who had owned Radio Nova, had a sister station in the same building called Kiss FM, and they'd got one of the guys that had worked on Nova to be station head of the station, general manager and program director. He says, we've got Tom Hardy, who you used to work with on Nova, and we've got several other good DJs, and we've got Roland Burke, the production guy who produced all your commercials and adverts. So we're doing a very similar format. And I said, wow, that sounds interesting. So I decided to come back from Monte Carlo. At that stage, I was living in Monte Carlo. I decided to move back home. And the station was a year before it got on the air. It was 88, early 88 before. It was test broadcast, but it was 88, January, February before it got on air. But it was really, really good station. I mean, every bit as good as Nova. I've heard some people saying it was even better than Nova, but for me, it was at least equal.
Yeah.
And it was that, you know, the buzz I got.
Frequency was Kiss. Was that 106?
103.7. From Monaghan right across the border into Belfast. And
I think young people today probably when they hear pirate radio, they don't understand how massive they were.
Oh, back then, yeah,
and
absolutely.
I would say that they sort of broke the music and the new cultures coming through.
There was quite a number of pirates on the border in Monaghan and Dundalk, beaming into the north, particularly Craigavon, but some got as far as Belfast. And then there were pirate stations around the Donegal border. Into Londonderry, and out in Enniskillen. There were pirates everywhere around the border because you couldn't get a license in Belfast or Northern Ireland. So all these stations were set up on the border, called border pirates, aiming for an audience in the north. And so Kiss took off really well. And I thought to myself, I was on this amazing station in Dublin, called Nova. And I remember it was just, it's hard to describe to somebody these days, but when you walked through the doors, there was a long corridor and it was stacked with brand new television sets, cases of wine, every kind of giveaway that you could imagine, stacked up. They were throwing product at this station to give away, and the advertisers were throwing money at it to get adverts. It was just, and you know, in fact, when the station was closed down, the government nearly fell the next day because the politicians realised God, we've taken these people's favourite station away from them and they're not going to vote for us. Okay, you can go back on air.
Part of the people.
We were back on air next day, and we came back on the next day to say an official goodbye after being taken off. But then the government backtracked, so we were back on officially the day after that, and obviously never looked back. But there were something like the entire street was filled with people the day it was closed. The day after it was closed, because we organised. We didn't get a chance to say goodbye, so Chris put the station on the next day, and every DJ got a chance to say their goodbyes, and people were asked to turn up and support and sign petitions. So I have a picture at home of the front page of the Dublin newspapers, just wall to wall, a carpet of people, the full length of the entire Herbert Street, which is quite a long and wide street, and right round the corner into Bagot Street. Yes. And also people were asked all over Dublin to blast their car horns at 6 o'clock when we were going off the air officially, not being taken off the air, closing down our own way. And you were asked to blast your horn. And 6 o'clock, the cacophony of sound over Dublin of car horns was just incredible. And the yells and the chants on the street, Nova, 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 we want Nova. It was just second to none. And everywhere you went, I never paid for a thing whenever I was in Dublin. As soon as I knew I was on Nova or recognised me from Nova, everything, I never queued anywhere. I never paid for food or drink anywhere. It was just given to me because Nova was like godlike, this godlike sort of station.
People's only source of entertainment for the whole day, week, or whatever.
And at that stage, the economy was not great in Dublin. There was a lot of poverty, a lot of joblessness, and Nova brightened up people's lives. Yeah. So it was a saviour for many young people. And I counted myself lucky to be part of that experience, almost euphoric experience, you know. And here, Kiss FM started, and I couldn't believe it. The same kind of response to Kiss FM. Everywhere I went in Belfast, the same thing. You're on Kiss. I had a sponsored car. My cousin sponsored a Kiss FM car, which I had a free car use of, you know. So everywhere I went, it was again, I was been treated like royalty. And everywhere you went in Monaghan, it was the same. It was just like a second experience. Didn't last as long because they brought in they brought in the licensing bill by the end of the year, and you had to go off the air in order to be eligible to apply for a license. Wow. So Kiss FM went off the air on the 31st of December in 1988, and lo and behold, we're all waiting around 6, 7, 8, 9 months to see if we're getting the license. We didn't. So
kind of a bad trick that pulled on you.
It was, and you know, in retrospect, because they didn't get the license, they're sorry they didn't stay on air because
probably lost some momentum and stuff as well, and
would have lost momentum as well. Yes, but there was some stations stayed on, weren't interested in applying for a license. So this was 88, and I'm in kind of radio limbo. I didn't particularly want to go back to Dublin. At that stage, been there and done that. Kind of didn't want to go back to the Riviera. So I settled for being a DJ in the clubs and bars in Belfast until BCR was awarded a license.
Belfast
Community Radio BCR. And I got invited to join the station and was happy to be getting back on radio. Little did I know that it was not very well run and didn't have a proper format. And I was the only previous radio person with radio experience in the whole station. So the
BCR is probably the first one that I listened to whenever.
It was the first station in Northern Ireland after Downtown to get a license.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be community, so there had to be other kind of community-based programs, talk shows and things like that, and interviews and journalism
That's what
programs.
Eddie Ray done as... was that the one Eddie Ray done as?
Yes, he did some shows on that, a dance show.
Yep.
Indeed. And I was doing the afternoon slot at that stage. I think it was 2 o'clock to 5. Enjoying myself, just doing what I would do in Dublin or Riviera or whatever, just doing my own thing, music-wise and style and so on. But after about 3 months, the general manager threw a tantrum one day, threw a chair through the ceiling, I believe, in anger, and was let go. So it had been not going very well anyway. But they let him go and brought in a guy that used to work for Downtown in advertising, a guy called Chris Nixon. And when Chris took over, he called me into the office and he said, I know nothing about music, absolutely nothing. So he said, would you look after the music side of things? I said, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I was head of music and picking all the tracks and everything. And this went well, and the station was going somewhere and starting to get some proper figures and a proper sound to the station in terms of the format. Stuff, yeah. And lo and behold, a year or 18 months later, the guy who was let go had wormed his way back in as general manager after buying up disenchanted shareholders' shares. Came back in with a vengeance, and at one stage when he was leaving, there was a call for a strike. Let's back him. I said, I'm not getting involved. Head of news at that stage was Bob Huggins. He said, I'm not getting involved either. We were the only two. Everybody else had no experience. And well, Bob hadn't any experience in broadcasting either. But the rest of the people were all happy to be given their break in radio by this guy. So they felt, some kind of, what's the word, sympathy or empathy for him and wanted to support him. I said, look, a strike's not going to work, So I didn't get involved. It didn't happen, but it was obvious that he heard that I wasn't backing it, or the head of news, Bob Huggins. So when he came back, he gunned for the two of us and made our lives difficult.
Of course.
First thing he said, I'm looking after the music. Now, I play fiddle, so I've got plenty of musical experience. I said, yeah. I said, but that doesn't give you any kind of experience with pop music or golden oldies or knowledge of what is going to entertain the mass audience. So we kind of started bumping heads regularly, and then he started encroaching on my humor. He says, I didn't like that joke he told this afternoon. He says, I want you to run the jokes by me. I said, I'm not running my jokes by you. I said, I've been in radio long enough to know where to draw the line. Yeah. I used to push the envelope at times, and probably might not get away with it today, but I used to do things like fake adverts, about a new shampoo for gypsies called Go and Wash.
Oh,
a pun on wash and go. I didn't mean any harm, but it was a form of pushing the envelope and doing kind of not a shock jock, but
that's what sets you apart from that's the
that was it. He said, you're running all your jokes past me. I said, no, I'd rather leave. He says, well, okay. So he says, are you sure you don't want to do anything? I said, well, look, I'll do 3 hours on a Sunday for you if you leave me entirely alone. Mm-hmm. So that was fine. That was accepted. I set up CD Heaven, a music shop then in High Street, because I was off radio full time. And I'd previously had a radio record store in Ann Street, Caroline Music, famous store. I'd had that right up till I was offered the job in Downtown. And I was made an offer for it when I joined Downtown, and I sold it because I thought I won't really have time to do both of these. Really was really where I wanted to be, even though I enjoy the music shop business. So I started CD Heaven. It was going very well. And I was doing my 3 hours on Sunday, and I brought in, it didn't actually bring him in. I recorded, I wrote a little comedy sketch with John McLean, the spitting image guy, spitting politics, and all this. I knew where to draw the line, but we were doing all the quite close to the edge political statements, doing the Paisleys and the Jerry, what do you call him?
Adams.
Jerry Adams, and so on. So we were doing all the political stuff, and I would write the thing, and I knew his character, I knew what, and I wrote his lines for him, and he'd do the odd ad lib, but generally he would do it his way. He'd take my script and do it his way. And we had a great little 60-second bit of comedy, which was quite cutting edge, until he heard it one day and he said, "Oh my God," he said, you're antagonizing and angering everybody. You'll get us taken off the air. Stop it. Oh, excuse me.
Was that you again?
Oh, I should have turned that off. That'll be somebody offering me this brilliant job on radio somewhere in the world, Abu Dhabi or somewhere like that, you know. But anyway, he said, I said, "Finished, that's finished." Reluctantly, I had no choice, so it's just gone through the motions for a couple of months.
It's kind of like feeding in what you say, like, because Northern Ireland, we have like a dark sense of humour, and if you're saying the radio stations have like a more conservative feel, they're sort of try to stay away from that, but ironically that's what people...
He didn't want to rock the boat, but at the same time, I mean, probably the backstory was always he wanted you, he wanted rid of me, probably. And, you know, the next thing is then, the station's going very badly. The last set of figures they had done, the last survey they had done, had been done before he came back. But a month later after he came back, he claimed the rise in audience figures for the previous person that had been in charge. But it was, you know, if you knew radio, you knew he wasn't fooling anybody, only himself. Oh, I'm only back a month and the figures have gone up, you know. But anyway, what was really happening was the figures were going down because he was interfering with the music and putting on just tracks that were never going to go anywhere, you know, float anybody's boat. So that was it. It got into financial difficulties, struggled on for 2 years. And the next thing it was bought over by Owen Oyston, a famous broadcaster or station owner in England. They bought it over, and his daughter came over to run it. And she was over here 3 or 4 months, organising programs and everything. And I was speaking to the head of the advertising agency that they had employed to promote the takeover of this station. They'd been given a £250,000 budget to launch this station. Relaunch the station as Classic Tracks BCR, or no, City Beat. I had rebranded with Chris Nixon the BCR to Classic Tracks BCR, doing Classic Tracks as the music format. And when Oyston's daughter came in, Karen Oyston, she said, "We'll be bringing in a program controller from one of our stations in England." And in the meantime, I was asked to a meeting at Navigator Blue, I think was the advertising and PR agency who was handling this relaunch. And the guy there, Tony Axton, said to me, he said, "I hope you'll be doing the breakfast show because you're the only one there, really. I would sack everybody." I don't mean this in any bad way. He said, "I'd sack everybody and start with you in the breakfast show and add others." And I'd met him several times over the next couple of months. And then one day I called into the station. They were based at Russell Court, that stage studios. I called in and I said, "Where is everybody?" "Oh, they're down at the launch." I said, "What launch?" "The relaunch of the station is happening down in the Europa." So I charged down there, and it was already underway. I just peeked through the closed partition doors, and they're giving a speech. They're just about to announce the lineup, and I wasn't in it or on it in any shape or form. So I was raging, obviously very angry at this stage. And
what happened?
I went in to the meeting when the press launch had finished officially. I went straight up to the owner. I said, "Karen, where's my show? I wasn't mentioned." She says, "Oh, I think there's other plans for you." I said, "Well, nobody spoke to me about them." She said, and she called the program director over, forget his name. I think it was Tony, somebody or other. "Tony, come here and have a chat. You've spoken to Lawrence?" "Yes," he said. He hadn't. I said, I have no idea what I'm doing." He said, "Tony, speak to him today. Talk out the details and plan. Let him know what he's doing. So I met him at 6 o'clock that evening. And he knew that he had lied in front of me, saying that he had spoke to me when he hadn't. Yeah. And he says, "Oh, well, our plans for you," he said, "I would like you to be like out there in the streets, talking to people, getting vox pops." I said, "That's not me. I'm not doing that." I said, as far as I was aware, I was getting the breakfast show. Mm-hmm. He says, "No, other plans." So that was it. I was totally disheartened and let down, felt betrayed almost.
Sure.
So that was Friday afternoon, and my next show was on Sunday. I didn't say I was leaving at that stage, but after the meeting, I thought, that's me, I'm gone. Can't work for somebody that lied to me in front of my face. So I decided I was going, but I wasn't going quietly.
Is this the lock-in?
This is the lock-in, yes. So
I never knew about this until I seen you put a post up a couple of years ago of it, the newspaper clipping.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow.
So I'm thinking, I'm on there on a Sunday afternoon. There's nobody in the building. Maybe one journalist on newsreader. That would be it. So I decided I'd lock myself in and say goodbye. I got the idea actually from DLT, famous English DJ on Radio 1 or 2 at one stage, and he had locked him. He had given the BBC a piece of his mind when he was leaving, and I thought, that's what I'm going to do. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Let people know what's going on. And I decided, a bit of coverage, if I got some TV coverage here. So I phoned one of the local journalists who worked for GMTV at the time, Barbara McCann.
Yep.
And I said, "Barbara, I'm about to resign from this station because they've lied to me and basically misled me. So I'm not going. I want to give them a piece of my mind before I go. So I'm going to lock myself in. If you want to get somebody or cover it yourself, send the cameraman up at 2:00. Mm-hmm. So I realized that there could be maybe a bit of jostling with the newsreader. So I thought, I'll get him out of the way. And I brought somebody up with me who was a fairly strong fella, not a big brute of a man, but strong enough just to hold the door closed to the newsroom so they couldn't get out and into the studio. But I said to the newsreader, I said, I had to explain the TV cameras which had suddenly arrived. So I said, I'm doing a bit of the TV for the new station's launch. This was my pretext. So if you do the news at 2 before I start, just leave me to it then. And that was the plan. So as soon as the news was done and they were out, oh no, it was actually up to 2:00. I said, give me the 10 minutes up to 2:00 and then come in just at 2:00. But I had the door closed, so she couldn't get in at 2:00. And the TV cameras were in the studio with me. Guy was holding the door to the newsroom closed. I'm in there, and I'd gone in and I had about 3 or 4 sheets, A4 sheets, all written out. I was going to town and on everything that was wrong with the station and everything that could have been done and should have been done. And for some reason, the owner, Karen Oyston, came into the station, just pure fluke, at about 8 minutes to 2:00. And she said, what's going on with the TV cameras for? She got a bit suspicious, And then she managed to say to the newsreader, I think you should go in and make sure there's nothing untoward said, So he tried to come in and my guy closed the door, but eventually there were 2 or 3 of them pulling from the other end. So the newsreader got out of the newsroom and down the corridor into the studio and grabbed me, and I just started to say, I'm Lawrence John and I'm leaving today, blah, blah, blah. And he grabbed me. I had a leather jacket on at the time with lapels, and he grabbed me and pulled me, and he was pulling the faders down so I couldn't be heard, pulling the music down, and generally manhandling me, and I'm breathless at this stage, trying to talk at the same time, finish what had started, whilst trying to stop myself from being dragged out of the chair. And the cameraman was there filming all this. So there's a video, I think, on YouTube of it all.
There, yeah.
But I said, you do realize that you're virtually assaulting me here, and it's on television. And he went white as a sheet and left. And I finished the rest of what I had to say breathlessly because obviously the tussle. And
I'm sure adrenaline was flowing.
But in the meantime, the owner had called the police, so the police had arrived. And it was a policeman come into the studio and said, I've spoken to the owner, and if you leave quietly now, there'll be no charges pressed. In the meantime, nobody knew how to switch the station off to shut me up. So I went on for like 3, 4, 5 minutes, something like that. And then I started the record. And the next thing, station's off the air.
That would have been absolutely insane listening to that.
It was. And a journalist, who was it? Oh God! A couple of journalists actually said it was the best radio on that station ever. The best 15 or 20 minutes we ever heard ever. It was just like, it was like a movie almost, you know.
Sure, some people probably thought it was like a sketch or something.
Yes,
or is this real? This can't be happening.
A setup or whatever, yeah. But I agreed to leave peacefully. Went out. My dog was with me everywhere. He was even in the studio, so I had him in my arms as I got out the front door, and suddenly his cameras flashing everywhere. They're getting me. I'm coming out like some kind of James Dean with a leather jacket, but the dog under my arm, little, but looked like a poodle. It's a Bichon. But that was it. I did a few interviews, and that was it. I got a few calls from people saying, "Oh, jeepers, that was great. What are you going to do now?" And I thought, what am I going to do now? And I had this idea that I might get some backing for another cross-border station. Mm-hmm. So Chris Evans is quite a live wire, so I decided I would fly to London the next morning, or that evening, to be there the next morning and grab Chris as he came off the breakfast show. So I never met him before and didn't know him, just knew of him, you know. But he was, you know, one of these mavericks of radio anyway, so I'd liked him. And I thought he might just be up for something like this. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Mm-hmm. So I got the flight over that evening. Couldn't get one to London. Got one to...
was Chris doing the big breakfast at this time? Or no, TFI Friday, was it? He was doing.
I think he was doing that as well, yeah. But I thought if I get there and talk to him, he might just go for it, you know, mm-hmm. being the live wire that he is, and certainly was then. He's mellowed a bit with age, but the only flight I could get that evening was to East Midlands Airport, I think. I don't think it was Birmingham, East Midlands, somewhere like that. It was about 100 miles from London, and I had nobody to look after my dog, so I had to take my dog with me as well. And I didn't have a dog kennel, and you know, at 6 o'clock on a Sunday evening, where do you get a portable dog thing? So I knew the neighbours had a cat. I said, "How big's your cat cage?" So I got a cat cage, stuck him in it, and
for the plane.
Just any means to get there. And I got there, and I couldn't get a taxi from there to London because I had a dog with me. They wouldn't take a dog, and so I had to thumb a lift.
Really?
I thumbed a lift down the motorway right into Dublin, and I arrived at this hotel at midnight, and I had to check a few of them for one that allowed dogs. So I got the dog in, and I was down at Broadcasting Bush House, I think it was then, the big studio, the big BBC building, mm-hmm. famous building with a round corner on the outside. I was in the reception and asked if I could talk to Chris Evans. I told them why I was there, and they put me through, and I spoke to Chris on the internal phone, and he says, "Oh, come on up, and we'll get you on the on air." Mm-hmm. So I'm up on, I don't know, 3rd, 4th floor or something like that, just about to go in. He says, "Oh, you got a dog with you?" We can't have a dog in the studio, so I wasn't allowed in the studio. He says, "Go back downstairs and we'll do the thing on the phone." So I went back downstairs, and he said, "Okay, Lawrence, so you're working for this station, and you get fed up. It was going nowhere. You decided to retire or leave and give them a piece of your mind." And he says, "I can see now that you had the perfect opportunity, a quiet Sunday afternoon, only one person in the newsroom, easy done. Nobody knew how to take the station off the air, but they eventually did. And he says, the next thing is they have to restart the station and to put in a station ident. And whose voice was on that ident but mine? My voice. He said, so they had succeeded in getting me off the air, only to put me back on the air, albeit in a recording. So he thought, oh, 3 cheers for Lawrence, who's done something, struck a blow for radio in the UK, and they got 3 cheers in the studio, you know. So I got a call then. I'm walking down the street just outside BBC afterwards, and my phone rang, my mobile, and it was the Belfast Telegraph and Ulster Television. Belfast Telegraph interviewed me down the phone. UTV wanted me to be on the evening magazine programme at 6 o'clock, head to head with the station owner, Karen Oyston. And I said, oh, I'll be tight. I'll have to get a flight back. So did my best to get a flight. I just got one that would have got me there in time. I'm out to Gatwick or Heathrow, whatever it was. I think it was Gatwick. And just about to get on the plane, and they said, can't get on that.
No dog.
The dog, that's not big enough for him. We're not letting him on. So they refused to let me on. I couldn't leave him. So I had to decide what to do. And the only thing to do was to cancel the flight. I couldn't go. So I missed the opportunity of being on UTV Live that evening. And, I forgot to say, the dog had broken out of the cat box. That's what it was on the journey over. And he was in the hold. I could hear him barking in the hold below me. So when we got...
On the plane on
the way over. And when I got out, the captain asked me to go outside before the passengers disembarked. They opened the hold, and could you get him out of that? Because he was no longer in the cat box. So I got him out. So I didn't have anything to put him in the whole time I was in London. And then when I went back to the airport, they wouldn't let him on without some kind of cage or carrier, whatever. He was going to have to go in the hold. So that was it. I couldn't get back. And I missed my opportunity. So I got a later flight and got home and realised the furore that had burst on the scene. And again, I wasn't too sure how this all panned out and what the public's perception or even industry or radio broadcasting people thought about this, about what I'd done. So I went to Navigator Blue, Tony Axton, who had been discussing a breakfast show with me prior to my exit. And I said, Tony, you know what's going on? He says, he says, I know all the news, he said. I said, well, I'm here to find out what the response is or what you make of it all. What harm is being done? Where can I go from here? What do you think? He says, well, first things first, the press launch for City Beat was on Thursday morning. And he said the next day there were just a few lines somewhere in the Irish news, nothing anywhere else. So he said they spent all that money on a press launch and got nothing. He said, you had them all over the papers everywhere. You gave them £500,000 worth of free publicity on the Monday for what you did the day before and locking yourself in. So he says you handed them a gift.
I suppose a lot of people will be tuning in to see what they say about it there.
Yeah. So, but I said, well, that's good for them, but what about me? Where can I go? And I thought, where can I go? And I'd spoken to Chris Evans on the phone, but not interested. So I was back in Radio Limbo Land.
What year is this? Mid-90s?
This would have been 95, 96. And I thought, I have to start another station, cross-border one. And I realised, talking to the engineer for Kiss FM, that the mast that was 150 feet high on the mountaintop, highest mountain in Mona, straight out to Belfast, was still there. So I thought, well, if I got backing, I need a transmitter, porta cabin, generator, because it's up on the top of the mountain. Put all the costs together, advertised for some backers in the newspapers. Got a number. I didn't want to put one guy in with a big lot to lose if it was closed down, because obviously there was licenses in the Republic of Ireland now. But I was hoping that being in the border it wouldn't affect, and not aiming for Dublin, it would be overlooked, which it was. But I envisaged maybe 3, 4, 5 people putting money into this. But one guy came along and he was, I want all of this. I want all of this. I'd put all the money in. I said, well, what if you lose? He says, that's my loss. He says, but he put in 150 grand to get us off the ground. So I'm left there with, I'm left now with a fledgling station that's about to be built from the ground up, apart from the transmitter. So what do I do? I started a small pirate operation, which was literally a transmitter and a video cassette player and a goat shed on the side of Black Mountain. And I was there operating every weekend for three months.
What did you call this one?
It was Energy 106.
So this is
I decided I had the name already, Energy.
So all those things that had happened, a lot of people, I'm sure, are glad that happened.
Oh,
I brought about Energy 106.
Yeah, well, I'd started with, I'd come up with the name, and it wasn't a name that I'd taken like Kiss or Z100 before. This was just the name came to me, Energy, because I always felt I was full of energy, and I thought, take this, and I came up with this sci-fi theme, and a logo that looked really kind of Enterprise-like, Starship Enterprise.
It's still going today.
It's still going today, and I thought, now my getting the music's easy. What is it? And there were 2 openings to specific genres that could have attracted a following. One was dance music, and the other was country music. And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, Big T's in downtown 5 nights a week, and Hugo Duncan's on Radio Ulster. There's probably enough country music there, so we'll go for the dance music. And I was running the music store in High Street, so I had a big following for American country music, and actually had CMTV, the short-lived country music channel, on, and 6 TVs I had in the store. But I was also looking at European music, the like of channels like Viva that were doing trance and the music that was coming out in 96, 97. And I realized that's it. I'll go for the dance. So the format and the music was fine. And I thought, well, it's only me as a DJ. This would be, people will think I'm the most vain person on the planet. Set up a whole station that's just me. Or I don't want anybody else to be involved. And I thought, can't be just me. So I thought, well, I'm not going to be the only DJ on the station. People will think I'm just up my own backside. So I decided, I came up with the idea of giving the station a kind of personality in itself. So I wrote all these liners and sweepers, and got a voiceover guy in America who could do this powerful imaging for me, and I got a production company in Los Angeles I'd write the scripts, send them to him, and then he would send them to the production company, and they would give me all singing, all dancing, sound effects and everything. So I really had powerful imagery, space imagery, and I think I had about 90 jingles or sweepers. None of them were sung, they're all sweepers. And every one of them was sci-fi loaded,
Why did you pick sci-fi as a sort of theme? Were you into
I wasn't that into sci-fi.
You just thought, here's a market
it's just
for
the energy and the elliptical shape. It just took root from me seeing this image of this Starship Enterprise kind of logo in outer space. So I wrote about 80 or 90 sci-fi themed sweepers. And then I'm starting to think, well, okay, that's the voice of the station, and it's creating identity and image in between every couple of records. And the next thing I thought, well, there's no DJs and I can't speak, and then there's adverts, so I had to obviously support the station. So I went out and sold the advertising myself, got enough to start with, and I wrote sci-fi adverts as well. So everything about the station was sci-fi. And then I had 2 things to overcome. Even if other DJs had been available, they may not have wanted to take the chance of working on a pirate station, or they may want to have been paid, and there was no budget after all the expenditure to that point, and I thought I can't take somebody away from legal radio, and yet at the same time I couldn't really think of any DJs, or didn't know any DJs that could really do something like I had been doing for years, starting in Dublin and with Nova and then Kiss FM. So in the absence of no other DJs, we've got to make the station DJ free, including myself, in case it looks like vanity on my part. So the imaging and the voice of the station grab people's attention. The adverts, we used to request the adverts that were that entertaining, excuse me. And the next thing I had to overcome was, it's 70 miles away. I set up a studio in the shop on High Street, and I pre-recorded 3-hour VHS tapes with dance music on them, interspersing the jingles, sweepers, and adverts. So 70 miles away, and the tapes last for 3 hours. So we got a 3-stack video player. So when one finished, there was a little signal on it that triggered the next 3-hour show, and so on. But then you've dead air for maybe 6 or 8 seconds, I think, but between the one tape finishing and the next one started. So how do I turn that negative into a positive? So I come up with Energy 106 Black Hole Alert.
Yes. So
the Black Hole Alert grabbed people's attention, and you knew there was going to be nothing for 6 or 8 seconds, or would it even come back on? So at the end of at the start of the next tape would always say, Energy 106 Black Hole Alert successfully navigated.
Yeah.
And that was it,
I really love the format, that the way they done it with the 3 hours. Like I was saying, the soundtrack to my teenage, it really was, because we were flying about Saturday night, and it was just like
and you had that on in the car,
constant, like just all the thing. And the way it was the 3 hours, then it was sort of repeated. You sort of heard it tune in and out, and you were like, right, I know what's coming on after this one, and so it was like you were getting a new compilation, 3-hour compilation every week of exactly what songs that you want.
Exactly, because every week we would play a lot of the popular ones, and then add maybe half a dozen new ones every week. And the existing ones that you knew and heard on the previous week's programming would have been in different order. So it freshened it up.
Yep.
But the funny thing about it was, and people talk about, pre-recorded programs and music that comes around too quick. Nobody ever complained about the same program going out for an entire week.
No, that's saying it was like,
it was like having your own personal mixtape that you played over and over again.
It's like just a compilation of your tunes that it was just 3 hours long, and you listen to it all week, and then you got a new one the next week. I think if you had done it in the traditional style of a DJ sort of saying in between,
yes,
it would have been successful, but I just think there was something so different.
It was just totally different and fresh.
It was and it was in tune to sort of
what was happening in music wise. Yes, that's right. They got a good write up in the Belfast Telegraph after about 2 weeks. Lindy McDowell, journalist, give us a really good write up saying this is the listen to station if you're a teenager. And my own son is hooked on it religiously. And if there's any justice, the powers that be here will give this station a license, because it's shown the demand for such a station.
Everybody I knew listened to Energy 106, and even like our parents and stuff, they were tuning in. And it's funny you were saying about you were doing it in your shop.
That's right, the shop. So people used to walk into the shop and they'd hear me talking, they'd recognise the voice, and they would just be gobsmacked.
It was like seeing.
Did you do that yourself?
Yeah, it was like the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain sort of scene, where you're like in the corner and you can hear you doing the over, and you're just like.
Well, the funny thing about it, you mentioned that, and it's just occurred to me that there was a scene in the George Lucas movie American Graffiti, where one of the teenagers who had just got off for the end of the what do they call it, when they finish high school, they're all graduating, and they were roaming around the town, and one guy was fascinated by the legendary DJ Wolfman Jack. The guy who goes, my, gonna take you high, gonna take it, all this. So, and he was just fascinated, and he wanted to get a record played for this girl he was trying to impress. So he drove up to this mountaintop, and he got his way into an unlocked studio, and he hears the voice Wolfman Jack, and he sneaks in just as the DJ. He didn't see him speaking, so he wasn't sure. And he says, "Are you Wolfman Jack?" "Oh no, that's not me, son. He's not here at the minute." And I think what he does is say, "Sure, I'll play. I'll get Wolfman to play that for him." And he's lets him go, and the guy goes out, and he's just halfway down the hall, and he hears the voice again, and it was the Wolfman Jack, you know. But it was like, and he looked back and confirmed visually it was Wolfman Jack. So it must have been that kind of moment for people. I'm only just thinking this today for the first time, but I was very well aware of it, especially in the years since then. But at the time, people used to come in. Somebody would be serving behind the counter, and I'd be over facing the high street with it right up against the glass window of the shop.
Yeah, because you couldn't see because you only seen the back of.
You only see the back. You could come up the side of me, of course, or you could actually look through the window from outside, the tiny window. Because there was a pillar, part of the building pillar was outside. But people used to come in and be just gobsmacked. And someone would wait around maybe and just wanting to talk to me, you know. It was just...
I was probably too embarrassed to go and talk. I always get sort of like when I seen people...
and then
like
DJs were coming in from all over the country wanting to buy the music, so I was bringing in imports of all this dance music.
That's another thing I want to mention, because the music was so unique and so you never heard it anywhere else. How did you get...
Well, I scoured Europe for tracks in the various countries that weren't released here as singles. And I went over to Amsterdam several times, scoured the music shops there, went to Berlin, scoured the shops there, and I would find tracks that had been released in the previous year or two, or just released there and might not be out in the UK for ever, or in a few months, you know. So I'd come back with loads of these compilation dance albums and singles, and have a field day with really amazing new music that nobody had heard of before, you know. But I then started bringing over acts, dance acts.
Yeah. So before
PAs.
we get to that,
Right.
Well, we want to go to, because I know who you're going to say, Simone Danny.
Yes.
So where did you first hear Superstar? Because that is the most iconic song, probably in Northern Ireland and Scotland, for the dancing. That was I first heard it.
Yeah, I'm sure I've said where I heard it before, but for the life of me, I can't remember where I heard it. No, I think I just got it on a CD and liked it and thought, this is great. And I put it on the air, and everybody was commenting on this brilliant track. Now, as far as I know, one of the guys that used to do the dance show on Coole FM, what was his name? Did Saturday night 6 to 7.
Glenn Pavis?
Yes, Glenn Pavis. I think he had played it once or twice, but he only had an hour once a week. So, in 4 weeks, he might only have played it twice. And I'm not sure what response he got, if any, to it. But so I wasn't the first to play it, but I was the first one that really got behind it and mass played it. And that, there's half a dozen at least, maybe 10 big tunes that you would never have heard anywhere, and they got played in the station, and people just loved them to death.
Maniac as well.
What's that?
Maniac as well is another one.
Maniac was another one. That was doing things in Dublin. I don't know whether it would have got much exposure other than maybe on Coole, Glenn Pavis's show. But we went to town on Maniac, obviously, which is a huge track.
What would you think would be an interesting question?
Sorry?
An interesting question of Cap. What would you think would be the biggest tune for Energy 106, Superstar or Maniac?
Oh, Superstar, definitely. Yeah. Maniac would be up there, not quite at the same level, you know.
I'd agree.
But there were other things like Bits and Pieces and so on that were great classic dance tracks. I used to, it's just my sense of humour. I used to throw the odd novelty one on that I actually liked. There was one called Taxi Driver. Right. Do you remember that?
No.
I am a taxi driver. It was done in an Indian voice, and it was a ravey kind of dance.
I think I remember one. A tractor, was it? It was like dead. What do you call that? Their innuendo, but it wasn't like.
You're talking about a song I actually wrote,
right?
The car song. Yeah. Was that the car song you're talking about? I wrote a couple.
And then it goes into another bit or something.
Well, I wrote 2 or 3 novelty tracks and produced them down in Bangor with James Everett and in Mickey Modell's studio.
Yeah, and Chris.
And Chris, and they had quite a bit of success, both on radio and in the sales in the shop, because I owned them and I was selling the CDs of them in the shop. But I was started to bring the acts over then, and a year we'd been playing Superstar for a year, and I kept thinking, you know, the normal life is of a hit. You play it for 3 months, and by that stage, people really don't want to hear for a while. So you rest it. You might bring it back occasionally after that. But every time I tried to do that, where's Superstar? Get it back on. So I gave up trying to take it off.
Just carry on.
And a year later, I thought, I wonder if I could get this group over here. And it was just a keyboard player who had written the song, a keyboard player, DJ, and producer called Chris Shepherd. And the vocalist was Simone Denny. I think she's from Chicago. But anyway, he got her as the vocalist, and she did a whole album, I think, with him. But I phoned him, and he says, yeah, sounds interesting what you're doing. You're on a pirate radio station and all. He says, could be interested. I'll speak with my manager. So he did. And the manager said, right, we'll get you over there. I think it was 20 grand or something. I got to bring them over for, at that stage, it was big money, for 4. I thought, we've got to put them on 4 gigs. So we did I think we did the Depot in Moira, the Met in Armagh, the Copacabana in Bangor, or was it a different name at that stage? Might have had a different name, but it was the Bangor venue that was originally Copacabana, and the Orpheus in Belfast. And I couldn't be at all of them, so I think Danny D was at one of them. Some of the other DJs were at the other ones. But the Orpheus, I think they were licensed for about 700 or 800. We had 900 in, and people were standing on the tables. And when the group performed Superstar, well, the keyboard player had his keyboards, and Simone was
once that organ
belting out, she was belting the song out, and the place erupted. It was hands up to the ceiling in the entire room, 900 people. It was just incredible.
And it's still like that there.
And when I was a teenager, I remember that kind of hysteria for around the Beatles. And I had never seen anything like it until that night in the Orpheus. And it was the biggest of the 4 venues that were playing. But when she finished it, I had to have it again. And 3 times she sang it. I just wanted to hear it over and over again, you know.
And it is one of... There's not very many songs that you can listen to over and over for
and I'm still not tired of it to this day. So that's me up to the point where Energy was taken off the air.
When did you mentioned Danny D and Stevie B, the other?
Oh yes, very soon. Yes,
when did they come into?
Very soon after I'd started Energy. Danny, like yourself, being a DJ, was glued to Energy and wanted to be on there as a DJ, and came in. I says, we don't take any DJs. He says, well, could I sell advertising or something for you? I said, okay. So we started selling advertising, and he did a good job on it. Brought in advertising. I couldn't spread myself everywhere, so it was great to have somebody else bring in the ads, and I just wrote the script and voiced them and produced them. But it didn't take long for him to wheedle his way into a Saturday night spot for a mix. And I think it was just a 1 hour with himself. And I'm not sure how long. It might have been months before he said, listen, maybe could I get one of the other DJs on to join me? I think it would be good having a 2-hander. So he said, I could work with Stevie. So give Stevie B a chance. So the 2 of them. And they proved popular as a duo as much as Danny had been popular on his own anyway. So, but from the minute Energy took off, I realized that there was an opportunity to, if you weren't selling adverts, or even if you were, have the bonus of doing gigs, Energy 106 gigs. First big one we did was we needed DJs. So Danny was the first of the DJs, and I thought, brought along Stevie, right, Danny D, Stevie B, so pick the letters, because at that time there were a few dance acts that were just using the letters after their name, you know. So it was Danny D, and then Stevie B, and then Tommy B, and then Drew R, and leaving somebody else out, I'm sure. They'll come back to me. Yeah. But
I remember thinking, actually, saying about the letters, I was going, will I be called DJ Ron E? I don't know.
Yeah, Ron E, right enough, yeah.
I don't know.
So that was the DJs, and I thought, right, we need to get some gigs in, because Danny can go out and do one, but if we have another one, he can go and do another gig, or we can put twice as many DJs on. So that was it. It ended up we generally all did one gig somewhere with myself as MC or compere, our host, and whoever DJs were available. It was always Danny and another or two others even. But the first big gig I think we got was in the this anniversary gig coming up with myself in later this year. Was the hotel in 5 Mile Town.
Yes, I've seen Danny Cragen post about that there.
I just, what's it called now? It's gone right out of my head. But anyway, first gig, I couldn't get into the town to get to the gig. It was gridlocked. Police were on duty, diverting people, 900 people. And the town was gridlocked. But I eventually got myself in, and that was it. And that became a regular Friday night or Saturday night gig for us.
I think all the wee towns around Belfast as well was just Energy 106 mad, weren't they, like, too?
Yeah. Like? I was then approached by somebody to do the Orpheus, which had been going downhill. And they offered me a Friday night. So I went in then, and that's when I started bringing the groups over, because I thought just putting a DJ on here isn't enough. So I organised groups that had been on Top of the Pops that week, which is a big show in those days, and artists that had big dance hits. Love Inc. was obviously one of the biggest ones, but we brought in some of the other big name dance acts and put on maybe two in the one gig to make it an event, and it went really well. So we were averaging about 200 people on the Friday night before I brought the groups or PAs over. I brought DJs over as well, Sash and other notable DJs at the time. So I put a guest DJ on, or I put a guest PA on, and we got the numbers up from 2 to averaging, depending who the artist or PA was, up to maybe 450 on the Friday nights. So the hotel were over the moon because we'd brought in big business, but they also, because I had billboards all over the city and bus shelters with the names of these artists and PAs that were appearing, and that increased the overall profile of the venue. So their Saturday night, not only did we double the Friday night on average, but their Saturday night, which was nothing to do with Energy, saw the increase and almost doubled its numbers to about
like
6 or 8, because it had been a big night, and Friday they couldn't get off the ground. So that went really well for ages, until usual story, greed creeps in, and the venue said, we need to take some of the share of what you're getting. I says, well, it's costing money, and
sometimes they don't see whenever they're filled, and they see the promoter making money, they're like off. But
and for
whenever it doesn't fill, it's the promoter takes a hit.
And also for about 6 months before it took off, I was, making no money at all, maybe even losing. But we turned the corner and it was making money, and that was said, look, you're not willing to give us half or whatever. You just go. And I said, well, I'm not willing to give you half. So we left. And they brought in somebody the following week, and they got nobody. Nobody turned up. The DJ who was booked was an English DJ, a name DJ. I'll not mention her name, but a well-known English DJ, brought over as a guest DJ. She never left her room because there was no people. So it folded within a matter of weeks. So that was the power of Energy at the time, and the owners just couldn't see that. But that was their loss. I mean, it was our loss too, or my loss too. But
and was that the last time you were in there then? So this one's coming up soon. What date is it? Just for
well, that was the Orpheus. It's no longer there as a venue. It's a hotel, I think, only now. But the hotel in 5 Mile Town, gosh, it's tripping off my tongue almost, but I can't think of it. But I've been back, I think, once or twice in a year or two after we went off the air, but not after that, because obviously numbers dwindle when you're not being advertised on the radio, But this will be the first for, 12, 15 years. The anniversary one coming up. And then we're doing the Seago Hotel on the anniversary tour.
Seago's at Bangor?
What's that?
Seago Hotel? Where's
Seago at Portadown.
Oh, Portadown.
and I think maybe one other venue. So I'll be doing 3 of those
Yeah.
events at least anyway. But you know, what happened was then the radio station in 2004. Somebody put a different story at the time, but it's since come to light that another station was using the top of our tower to broadcast a small pirate, and it was causing interference. So that got the powers that be in Dublin to come up and take us off the air.
Oh, was it
So
Dublin? I thought it was
this was
Belfast. It was, or the
No.
UK. It was.
No. The Belfast story was, I'll come back to that in a second. Well, I'll tell you the Belfast one first of all. I was doing the weekends and I was going to nightclubs doing a week guest appearance for Energy 106, which was just at weekends, and it was just non-stop, a 3-hour tape. In fact, one of the guys that I got a few DJs to do tapes. Milky was one of them. He used to do a house mix of 3 hours for me.
What's his real name?
He's on
on the radio. Massive name. It's just
we had McClelland, is it?
Yeah, Neil McClelland.
Neil McClelland.
We had him down here before. He sort of hosted our. We had the big lady thing.
Neil did a few housey kind of mixes for me. At that stage, I was doing commercial, but I wanted to sort of make it not just totally commercial. I wanted to get as many listeners in various genres or types of dance as possible. But it soon became apparent that once Energy became officially launched from across the border, that was the commercial stuff that people were after, you know. So as I say, I would do that every weekend. So I'd drive up on a Friday evening about 6 o'clock, 3-hour tape on there, and I'd go up on early hours of Sunday morning, and it was quite dancey, quite housey, and then I'd go up on Sunday morning and bring it back more commercial, and I'd go up in the early hours Sunday morning, change the 3-hour tape. So this was going on for 2 or 3 months while the station has been built in Monaghan, porta cabins and all the big transmitter gears and everything. So I'd been at, I think it was Taz nightclub in West Belfast the night before, and had a few drinks and stayed late. So a bit hungover the next morning, and there's a little dirt road that leads you right up to Black Mountain, and I was just driving up, almost hunched over the steering wheel. I just really didn't want to be there or do that. Just really fuzzy head, hungover. Normally I'd be admiring the sloping fields as I would go up, and the sky and the clouds or whatever it was, just taking in the scenery. This morning I'm just looking at the road in front of me, and I get to the very top of the hill, and there's a sharp turn right, and just as a sharp turn right I had to put the brakes on. There was police and army there and some officials from the Department of Communications, Ofcom, whatever it was. What are you doing here? I said, I'm coming to put some music on a tape in there, and you know that you need a license for that. I said, I didn't know that. We were just carrying out test transmissions to see how far we could get, because we're starting in Monaghan. So I got off with a caution, and that was that. I couldn't do it anymore from that.
I can't believe like how massive Energy was. I think I remember you saying on the show that the numbers that Energy was getting, the numbers that Coole FM was getting, but yet they were allowed license to go on air, but Energy wasn't.
Well, just before we get to the close down across the border, obviously surveys cost money. Didn't have the money for that, so we never had any surveys. But I got a call from the top advertising agency, or one of the top advertising agencies in Northern Ireland, McCann Erickson. I think they were based in Hollywood Road and still are, near Ashfield School. So I got a call from the guy. He says, you've probably got the most recognizable logo in the country, in that Energy logo that you have. He says it's everywhere and it's instantly identifiable. So he says, according to our surveys, you've got a really big listenership, 250,000 people. And that's just, we had some south of the border, and we had some west coast of England as well. But generally speaking, in Northern Ireland, he says, we reckon you've about 250,000 listeners, and we'd like to place an advert with you on behalf of Toyota Motors. It's really big company, as we all know. But I have an idea. He says, it's illegal to advertise on the RDS in those days. It was called RDS. It was a digital display on your radio.
Right.
But in the UK, it was illegal to advertise on it. But you're across the border and out of the jurisdiction.
So technically.
So could you put a message on that? The car in front is a Toyota.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I thought, my God, sure, yeah. So we got the advert, we got it on, and I can still see it to this day. I'm driving past McCann Erickson's one evening, past Ashfield School, and the wee message comes up, the car in front is a Toyota, and I looked and it was a Toyota. It was ironic, it was just brilliant.
Such a cracker like advertisement, because I remember that one as well, and then when you hear it, you look and go, is the one in front the Toyota? Yeah.
So, things were going really well, although they downtown cracked the whip and said they would pull all Toyota adverts forever if they didn't drop the ad on energy. So unfortunately, we ended up losing it again. But as I said, a small pirate station was broadcasting from the top of the mast that we had, unbeknown to me completely and without my permission, and they were causing interference. So the authorities in Dublin came all the way up from Dublin, 60 or 70 miles, whatever it is, from there to Monaghan, and took us off the air, cut down aerials and things like that to make so we couldn't go back on easily. And that was it. And I thought, where do we go from here? So I took legal advice, and I said, this is, I didn't know about the interference. I thought they were just taking us off the air because we didn't have a license. So I only found this out like a year or two later, that there had been this small pirate. And I took legal advice in Dublin because it was the Irish authorities. And I thought, this is unconstitutional. That's how all stations had been allowed and operated. Okay, their licenses have come in, but there was still a grey area. So I took out an action against the Attorney General of Ireland for unconstitutionality. £5,000 I put down to get this action against him, and I was told that should allow me back on the air for at least as long as the case is heard, which could be 2 or 3 years because of the number of cases waiting. So I thought, well, £5,000 gets me 3 years, okay. So I paid the £5,000, and they said, obviously, if they act before that's heard, it would be illegal. It's called sub judice. They'd be presupposing the court's outcome in their favour. So I took that out, paid it, and it took us 6 months to buy new equipment from America, get it all installed, and it was 6 months before we got back on the air. And we were only on the air for about 6 weeks when they came back and did it again, presupposing the court's the court's outcome, and acting in what's called sub judice. But they played a blinder because they thought, well, we'll not be able to afford to do this again and buy another set of equipment, which is absolutely right. So they knew that there was no comeback on the illegal act that they performed of sub judice. So that was it. That was energy gone. And I thought to myself, well, what do we do here?
This was around 2004 then.
What's that?
2004 then, this was?
2004,
8 years at energy.
And people were saying internet. And I read up on internet, and I read about the most successful internet station in California at that stage. Had just gone bust because it had too many listeners and it cost them too much to buy the bandwidth for them. So they had something at that stage, if my memory serves me correctly, $45,000 income per month, and the bandwidth was more because the more listeners they had, the more bandwidth. Now it's buttons compared to then, but I decided it wasn't worth it. That And even if I got the figures that they were getting, it wasn't going to be 250,000. I'm thinking, if I even get 100, I'll be lucky. And I don't want to go from that to that. I'm just going to leave it there, leave it on a high, and say that was then, and it was great while it lasted, and move on. So
2004 is internet's still pretty new then.
And it's still quite new now. But every Tom, Dick, and Harry has an internet station now. And you can put it on from your bedroom, and it basically costs nothing. But it's getting the programming on it, and that's when what's that? 2004. I actually went into TV and went in the other direction from dance, country music.
Right.
I've always had a soft spot for country as well as dance.
There was a country television show.
It was country music TV.
Yeah,
I did.
remember seeing that.
From I started producing country music because I had no outlet for my dance songs anymore, my dance productions. So I started producing and writing.
You've done a few productions actually. Just to go back, and I remember it was Build Me Up Buttercup and stuff.
I did that with the one of the lead singers of. It wasn't the original. It wasn't the singer in the group that sang the original Buttercup. It was a black guy called Clem Curtis who was his replacement.
Right.
But he covered it, and he had a great soul voice. He did Stand By Me as well for me. Sadly, he died a couple of years ago there, but a brilliant voice, brilliant singer. Sammy Davis Jr. took him to America under his wing, but he didn't make it over there. Just didn't have the connections, I suppose. But as I say, I was doing productions and writing some dance songs for local consumption. The car song was one. I'm trying to think of the other big one. The car song was "Did you ever get a ride? Did you ever get a ride?"
Yeah, ride on a was it Cadillac?
In a Bentley.
On Bentley.
Yeah,
that's the one. I was trying to think of it earlier.
He was doing it so they were doing it so gently in the back seat of his Bentley, stuff like that. It was all innuendo, but it was good fun, and people still request it to these days on the current online version of Energy 106, which I'm only slightly associated with because I don't have the time for it. And as I said, when I had the decision to make whether to continue with Energy and go online, I thought, no, that's it. I'll leave it there. I'll try something new. As it was, or as it turned out to be, I went into production and writing country music, and then ended up with country music TV on Sky and locally NVTV and Virgin for a while. Lasted for about 5 years until the channel I was on, the main channel I was on, was sold just like that out of the blue to a sports network, and that was me. No outlet for my TV. I was producing 3 shows a week and presenting 3 shows a week. So it then went full circle again, a couple of years, and I started to hear the music coming back that was on Energy. The trance sort of element was coming back. And I noticed more and more tracks that I thought, gosh, if Energy was on the air now, I'd be adding that in the playlist. So I decided to start an online station. And Energy was online with my permission and blessing, if you want it, as an online station from very soon after, or 2010 maybe it was, 6 years after. But and I'd done a few gigs that they had organised, the online station, organised Danny Cragen. Yeah. So I thought, well, I want to do it, but I don't want to do Energy again because I've been there and done that. And I'll come up with the name Jump, which is kind of energetic in itself. And I started an online radio station and brought guest DJs on, including the one
back again, didn't you?
What's that?
Danny D back again. He was doing Jump.
Yes, I got him to do some shows, and I brought over you were on a gig one night with a guy from Holland, a famous trance DJ, Whitey Share. What the heck's his name? It's escaping me.
From Holland. Is that Ferry Corson or somebody, is it?
No, it wasn't Ferry Corson, but a friend of his, Dutch DJ. But anyway, I had a number of big name DJs guesting on the station, as well as I tried to give the local guys.
I think I done some.
Yes, I think you did. And local guys, Glenn Montgomery, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. I think there was about 12 at one stage, including some of the, what do they call that local trance group?
NITF.
I had the NITF people on there. think a couple of girls, and the rest were guys. But 3 years, 3 years on the air, and it was going reasonably well, and I was enjoying it. But COVID came along, and I got to listening around, more time in my hands. I listened around and just got curious one day about whatever happened to Dublin, the Dublin market that I'd left.
Yeah.
And I knew
so the original Nova then.
the
how long
original
did that
Nova
last
never got a license. And there were 10, I think it was 9 or 10 stations licensed in Dublin. And I listened to them and I couldn't believe how bland and repetitive they were compared to what Nova used to be. It had a real exciting buzz about it. And I thought, why have they not just simply copied it? Nobody had copied it, literally. It seemed the obvious thing to do. We would to copy it, even if you didn't use the name, copy the format. Although one station did copy the name, but didn't do the format. So it was a bit of a misnomer, and a lot of people weren't very happy about tuning in expecting to hear the original or something like the original, only to hear, guitar-based rock music, But I thought about this, and I thought, there's nobody thinking about Nova anymore, and it's responsible for getting stations licensed in Ireland. And I just thought, this is a crime, I got angry, and I thought, I'm gonna do something about this. It's impossible to set up another station. There's no more licenses. I couldn't even get back in to set up another station. So I thought, tell you what, I'm going to do it online. So I started it online. I got the original jingles, and I started on my own and did the same kind of programming I used to do for non-stop, clutter-free, without jingles or DJs. Without DJs or speech, that I'd done on Energy. I did this for Nova. And then I was joined by a former colleague from Nova who'd, in the meantime, gone on to be program director or head of music at RTE, a fellow called John Clark. And John was happy to join me. He had actually been with Nova 100, but not very happy there. And he suggested somebody else who I had never met. Actually, he was after my time after I'd left Dublin. And I checked him out, and he was very, very good. He had been formerly after Nova in Dublin. He had moved to London with Chris Carey and tried to and helped him to set up satellite Radio Nova, which unfortunately was too far ahead of its time and folded after 6 months, despite having DJs like Tony Blackburn and Emperor Roscoe and Stuart Henry and David Hamilton, people like that. There weren't enough satellite dishes to receive satellite radio, so it folded. But Tony Mackenzie was that DJ who had helped Chris. And then after that, he'd gone on to be, I think, head of programming, head of music, or both, at a big station in Liverpool Radio City and one in Manchester Piccadilly Radio. So these two guys were joining me. So the three of us, it wasn't just suddenly me. It was people were hearing 3 different original DJs from the heyday of Nova.
Bringing it back.
So it's been taking off slowly but surely, but it's internet based, so it'll be a steady climb of listenership over a period of time, And as soon as they start putting internet as standard in most cars, that's when things will change. A lot of people are already using Bluetooth and have an app on their phone.
Yep.
I didn't even bother with an app because you can use something like Radio Garden these days. Just save your Radio Garden app, hit it when it's tuned to Radio Nova, and it's easy. So that's just to conclude matters. I don't know how long we've been here. Is it still?
I don't even know.
Still the same day.
How long have I been going for, James?
So,
an hour and 50. An hour and 15 minutes.
Wow.
Only halfway through.
that was the condensed version.
Jeez.
So yes. So Nova is building an audience progressively, albeit slowly, because it's hard to promote the internet unless you spend a lot of big money.
Yeah.
And we're not taking any adverts, and it's more of it's as much a tribute station as anything. I mean, I'm in it for the love of it, and the other two guys are. none of the three of us are taking any money, and we're all getting the same buzz we had on energy. Now, in the meantime, we've all been there and done it and got our money, and at this stage of our lives, we're all kind of able to do this without actually getting money.
Well, that's the dream, isn't it? You sort of do what you want to do and not have to worry about like the money, so you're just enjoying it.
I think almost every DJ, could be even yourself, would say, I'd do this even for free.
Yeah.
You know, I always said that. I would do this because I love it so much. I would do it for free, do it for nothing. And, I'm actually doing it for nothing now. But the love of it and the buzz and the passion and the enthusiasm that the three of us have at the minute is just like it was almost in the Nova days. We're all a lot longer in the tooth, as they say, but we're all DJs at heart, and we'll never be anything else. We'll always be DJs. So who knows how long it's going to last for, and maybe we'll go for dab at some point, or if the internet catches on or takes hold a bit faster, you may not even need dab, because dab's not that successful at the moment. There are people using it, but generally it's big stations that have it as an add-on rather than making a go of it on its own, It's still early days in the dab, and it's still early days in the internet. The difference being that the internet is a lot easier to run in terms of costs than dab is. So whilst I would like to go dab, I'm still kind of hedging my bets, particularly in light of recent surveys that have shown that internet car radio is starting to take off here. It's 70% of people listen to radio in America online, and the stations there are closing. What they call bricks and mortar station, i.e. those with studios and premises, have been closing. There's been at least 1 to 3 closures every week for the last couple of years. They're going into a basement studio and going online, saving costs. That's what
we're saying earlier. It's the technology's becoming that accessible and affordable.
And most people, I do my shows for Nova from home, John, in Belfast, or Hollywood, as I like to call it. There's a nice ring to it.
Hollywood,
I'm Lawrence John in Hollywood. And actually, Casey Kasem used to use that line, and so did Rick Dees. But it's Hollywood County Down in my case. But I get a kick out of saying that. So I'm doing it in Hollywood or Belfast, and John Clark's doing it in Dublin, and Tony Mackenzie's doing it in London, or near enough London. So yes, you can do everything from home these days. You don't have to leave home, and you can have a great time doing what you love doing.
Fantastic. It's been amazing listening to your journey. Like as I said before, I love listening to see how people came to be where they're being, all the thing. It's quite a journey. Like
I glossed over a lot of smaller items. I've just given you the bulletin headlines, but there's loads of other things that can come into it. I told you about business interests. I'd always done.
Whatever happened to the modelling thing then? The modelling business?
I had something happened with my partner, or my partner's boyfriend, at the model agency. So I walked away from it, and I think it just closed. I'll not say what it was. It wasn't anything proper, just something that he did that I kind of annoyed me. So I left that, and it was down to radio then, radio and discos, nightclubs in Leeson Street, so on. But in Belfast, I had the very popular and successful Caroline Music, as it was called, just where Bogart Boutique is in Belfast now, in Ann Street. And it was groundbreaking in its day, as much as, maybe not as legendary as Good Vibes with Terry Hooley, but I had a write-up in, newspapers, music newspapers like New Musical Express, as one of the best stores in Belfast. And we used to sell tickets for the various visiting groups. I remember selling tickets and emceeing Dr. Feelgood, a kind of semi-punk band, at the Ulster Hall, and various other things, And then obviously with the radio falling through at City Beat, I opened CD Heaven. And very soon, as Energy took off, it was suddenly the Energy 106 store and not CD Heaven.
Yeah.
It made a lot more sense.
And you've done a lot of Energy 106 CDs and albums as well.
Yes,
like they were quite popular,
the CDs were amazing. We got the DJs. For by and large, I picked the tracks for all of them, so that there wasn't any kind of too much duplication. But those were, they weren't illegal, but you know they were in a grey area.
Yeah, I remember you saying.
I remember somebody
the licenses. So if you were doing like a bootleg, you got one of each song.
Yeah, I did license the Energy 106 official Energy 106 album with the black background and then the red logo on it. I think it was something like £5,000 to license all the tracks on that. But that meant it got into the like of HMV and other stores around the province, you know. But other ones, I remember a jealous competitor shopped me to the what do they call the trading place or what the trading
the music
trading
standards.
office. You know where the trading standards.
Trading standards.
And they came down and they checked. Well, you know, I'm looking at this CD and I don't see any copyright issues because you're not selling these at the expense. You've got Love I Gone here, but you're not selling this at the expense of Loving CD here. You're selling it as a DJ mix of it into something else and out of something else.
Right.
So it's a grey area. We're happy enough that you're not sort of just bootlegging existing albums and stuff like that. So give them the Bible, but I mean, some of those were selling 5,000 copies.
Yeah.
You know, but that was just in the store. I didn't know it for quite some time that they were selling maybe 10,000 at Nuts Corner
at the market.
or Jonesborough, another 10,000, or at markets down even further down into Ireland or across in England. So, I mean, I was done out of a lot of money for those compilations, but I can't complain.
At the same time, it was good promotion because I sort of think of that there, you know, when people take my tracks and put them on USBs and sell them for themselves, you're like, well, I'm not getting the money, but then again, more people are going to hear it, so it's a trade-off in a way.
Yeah. So there we are. I think that's the kind of highlights and gist of what was meant to be a half-hour interview.
Yeah.
Half-hour podcast.
2 hours later. Yeah, it's been perfect. I say I loved listening to it. Like, and
but you yourself are doing quite well, DJ Energy.
Yeah, I'm not doing too bad. Like, you know, just like yourself, just enjoying the journey, and you know, just seeing how it goes. I enjoy being down here and doing.
If you can get a few pounds out of it at the same time,
that's it. As long as you have enough to keep doing it, that's what it is.
But the whole enjoyment is worth it, if nothing else. Should you never, as I said, I'd do this for nothing. I would have done it all for nothing my entire life, you know.
A passion.
But you do need to do something to bring food on the table and get some kind of lifestyle. So thankfully, my record shops and club DJing kept me going in the off radio days, you know. So I've had many stops and starts, but it's
quite. You know, I didn't know a lot about all the stations before. I knew you'd done Nova and then Energy and the one before it, Kiss, and then the lock-in one, of course.
After Energy, I did a short-lived one, which was called FM 100.
Right.
Did it from Monaghan as well, using a former station called KITS. The owner there said, "Do what you want." I did, and did programs for maybe 6 or 9 months, but it really wasn't going anywhere. And it certainly was nothing compared to Energy. So, you know, I'm lucky in that I've had 3 huge spikes in my life.
Yeah.
Nova originally in Dublin, Kiss FM in Monaghan, and then Energy in Belfast.
Yeah.
And you know, all 3 were euphoric experiences. I mean, they're just almost beyond comprehension to be as popular as I was on all 3 stations, and to see how popular those stations were with people, you know.
And usually see people, DJs, that come up and then they have their peak, you know, and then so it's one big thing, and then you don't really hear much of them. So to have 3 big sort of ones,
I probably would have been quite content for the rest of my life just living on my Nova days in Dublin. But then to get it again, second, a bite of the apple in Monaghan with Kiss, and then with Energy was unbelievable. You know,
I'm so glad all those things happened to get you to where the Energy was, like, because it's a big part of my life and a lot of other people's
yeah,
life.
it's, you know, life is a journey, and it takes you down various alleys and avenues all the way along the line. And sometimes you can go down one instead of going down another. And I mean, I could just as easily have not continued breaking the strike in Dublin,
Yeah.
and ended up living and working there, and probably, much as I never liked the station, maybe ended up on RTE or in one of the future licensed stations. I probably would have ended up down there, and I would have had a totally different life.
Yeah,
you know?
those sliding doors moments, as they
Yes.
call them. Isn't it?
So as I say, to get Kiss after that and to get Energy, unbelievable. I mean, I equate Energy as big as Nova, although people in Dublin wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
But I've been in both, and I've seen the reaction in both, and I can say that they were definitely equals, and that Kiss FM was just a bit too short-lived to have had the same effect, but it was getting there, and I got that buzz while for the short period of time.
Well, that's brilliant. I think we'll leave it there then.
Yes, I think we've got enough for this chapter anyway.
Well, thanks for coming, Lawrence, and I hope to see you
You're
again
welcome,
soon.
Ron.
And whatever.
Good luck with your music.
No worries, thank you, and good luck
And
to you.
I'll see you on the radio.
Yes. Dead on.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.